Hey everybody, welcome. We are live for this beautiful Friday. Hey Desiree, welcome. It is Friday, everybody. The weekend is finally upon us. And you know what that means? It's time for another Inkarnate live stream because that's how we roll here in Inkarnate. We like to start off our weekend with a little bit of Inkarnate fun. Hey, first time chatter Croptic, glad that you are here. So today we are continuing our series part 7 with creating an epic world with the fantasy world style. Today we're going to be focusing on two particular biomes. We're going to be focusing on the Fae and the Volcanic lands, and just maybe a little bit of lore for each one, and then, which I'm sure we'll have some time left over, we'll kind of discuss like how to brainstorm and kind of put together lore, or at least my method, okay? So let's just kind of jump right in. I'm going to start with Fae because it kind of fits into the Genesis story of this world that we're creating, in which the Fae is the primordial lands. It has the primordial pools, in which the very first life kind of crawled out of these primordial pools. And now what kind of grows from the primordial pools is the world tree, Yggdrasil, or the tree of life, whatever you want to call it. And then those trees' roots travel through the primordial pools and then into the oceans and then travel and connect. Their roots connect to all the other land masses, and we'll be showing you how to kind of create those roots. And you can see them under the water and then kind of connecting to the land. And then maybe later we'll have each one of those roots that kind of connects to the land. Maybe there'll be like a teleportation portal or something that kind of takes you to the primordial pools. I see another first time chatter. Hey, Carrie Basia, glad that you are here. So that's pretty much what we got going on here. So some cool tricks here is that, hey, another first time chatter. Hello, awesome. So many first time chatters. Absolutely love it. So we're going to start with the main feature that's going to be within the Fae lands, which is going to be basically, oh, look at all these first time chatters. Hey, Gingerist and Farenspite. So many people. Like to hear it. So many new people. I absolutely love it. So first I'm going to paint the land the kind of color that I want, and I want this to be more of a Fae kind of thing. And so what I'll do is I can pick any texture that I want, but I'm going to pick one that has a lot of kind of artifacts in it. So this one right here has some nice artifacts. And what's really cool is if I go down to advanced settings, I can go to color and then go to the hue, and I can change it to kind of whatever color that I want. And I might change it to this purple color. And as always, depending on the scale, you'll have to adjust the texture scale, right? So the more and more you scale textures or scale stamps down, that means you're going to have to compensate by scaling down the textures to a similar size. Otherwise, it starts to be a little out of place when your textures and your stamps are at varying sizes. It doesn't mean that always an ironclad rule or anything, but it's always good to scale down your textures when you also scale down your stamps. So I'll set to my FG layer because my land is set to FG. And then I'm just going to quickly paint a little bit of purple in here, like this. And this is not the final texture that I'm going to end up going with. It's just this is where I'm going to start it off with. I'll probably end up changing it and adding more later. It's just to kind of give me an idea of the area in which how big the biome is. So think of this as like the base texture. Next, I'm going to create some primordial pools, but I want them to be really big, and I want them to be kind of different and unique and to stand out. And so I'll use a crater, and then I'm going to fill it with the shape tool. So I'll check out this cool little trick about filling in craters with stuff. So we have some craters right here. There's 2 of them within this set, and we can kind of pick whichever one that we want. Now these have what's called a clipping mask that's on them. I can turn off the clipping mask, turn them on and off as I see fit if I want. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that the color seems a little off here, so there's a couple tricks. I could just go into the advanced settings and change the hue and make it a purplish color so it matches in, or I can go to the luminosity blend mode, click luminosity, and you'll notice that it picks up that purplish color. Now, I personally kind of prefer the hue over the luminosity because I kind of like the dark outline. That creates this nice contrast against that light texture underneath, and you notice that it pops out. Now to fill it up with something. Now, whenever I'm editing a stamp, that means I'm adding stuff on top of it. I try to scale it up nice and big so that way it's easier to work with. If your stamp is scaled down, see how blurry that is even in 4K? Whenever you're editing a stamp for any reason, make sure that you scale it up. That way it's easy to work with. The next step is to fill it up with something. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do the shape tool. We're going to go to shape. We're going to select pen, or you can use the brush. It's up to you how you want to go about it. I'm going to use the pen for now. I'm going to turn my stroke off and turn my fill on. I want to create these kind of interesting primordial pools. So what I'll do is I'll switch over to Fantasy Battle Maps in textures. This is the fill, by the way, for the shape that I'm working on. And what I'll look for is maybe a cool texture that might look interesting. Like I kind of like this lava. This right here, this magma texture looks awesome. But let's first place the shape within. And so the secret to this is, let's make sure that I have everything on the right layer here. This is layer 1. Let's make sure that my shape that I've got here is on layer 2, so it's above. And what I'll do is I'm going to follow the crater with the shape tool point by point. And this is going to create the illusion of like the pit being filled with this texture. Now don't worry about editing the texture. You do that later once you've put it down. So now I press enter, plus, and then there's the texture. Now I want to change the fill size. I don't really care for that angle, so I'll probably end up changing the rotation. Let's go with this way instead, and I'll change the color, which is the hue, which I'm going to go over to this right here. Oop, wrong one. This one right here, and change the hue to whatever color I want. Now, when I'm thinking about colors, I want to think about complementary colors. What colors go well with purple? Right? Now you could use colors like blue and red because purple's created from those colors. You could use yellow or even a green. All those colors work really well. It's up to you. Let's take a look. You know, I'm kind of thinking green would be interesting. Now the next step is that I want to change the blend mode because I want it to make it transparent a little bit. So if I go and select this, and then if I go over to blend modes, I'm going to just select the blend modes and kind of just pick the one that I feel looks the best for it. There's overlay, soft light, hard light, difference. There's color, luminosity. You know, I don't really like any of them. And so when that kind of happens, it's okay. What you end up doing is just dropping the opacity for it. And that way it will still pick up the texture underneath. Let's also add some more stuff. Like let's change the brightness of it. And let's also change maybe the fill scale a little bit bigger. There we go. Now you can kind of see what's underneath it, right? So now that I've done that part, I can start adding some more details to it. Let's add the tree. And there should be a world tree that we can add in here. Now this world tree, like I said, this is like the primordial pools in which the tree kind of rests inside of. And it kind of gives life to the world tree. Oops, I'm still in Fantasy Battle Maps. I want to switch over to Fantasy World here. There we go. And there should be a couple trees that are really big, like this world tree here and this one. This one's more kind of isometric, and I think these two are a little bit more flat. Let's kind of go with this one. I think that'll look better. Let's scale up. There we go. I'm just going to place it right on top of it just like that. So now I have that world tree. Let's go ahead and maybe make it a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. And then let's also change the hue and make it a different color. Let's make it match the kind of green below it, or make it purple, whichever one you want. I don't know which one I like better. I kind of like green. Let's take a look. You know, I kind of do like the green, but we can play with other colors to see how it looks. Ooh, I do like that pink. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I do like that pink. That's kind of cool. Let's bring the brightness up a little bit. This is a hard one to kind of decide which way I want to do this. Oh, thank you, by the way. Got some really nice people in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your support. Let's see here. I think this should work good. I think that looks okay so far. Let's go ahead and add in some more details to kind of create some overlap on the crater. So what I'll do is I'll go into the catalog, stamp catalog, and what I might want to do is take some of, let's see here. Right here looks good. Let's use either these mesas or these staglamites. Maybe this karst would look good. I'm not sure. Do the karsts have clipping masks? They do. Great. Okay. So let's go ahead and take this. And what I'll end up doing is I'm going to change the hue on this one so it gets that purplish color. And I'll place it in front. And what I want to do is create this illusion of overlap. So I've got this one right here. I've got another one right there. Let's put another one like right there. One in the back there. Maybe one right here. And what we're doing is we're kind of creating this interesting overlap. But what I want to also do is maybe look like rotate them a little bit facing away. And this might give it a little bit more realism because going straight up doesn't make any sense. So now we have these nice things kind of popping out here. So I think that looks good. And then maybe we want to add a few more things over the tree itself to make the tree more interesting. We could throw in all kinds of things. So let's go into the catalog here. You could have a floating island. Above it, we could have mushrooms growing on top of the tree. We could have multiple layers of the tree. There's so many different things that you can kind of do to make it more interesting. Like, for instance, I could have like a towering spire of some kind on top and just change that hue to get that pinkish color so it kind of goes up on top. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. And if people have other ideas, they can let us know. Underwater settlements, you know, I think we might have a stream for that. You might want to check locations. You know what? I have an idea. What about some waterfalls going from the tree down into the pool itself? I think that would be kind of interesting. So let's take these waterfalls and we're going to have to change the hue on them. Let's make them that green color. That looks good. Let's see here. I think we might have to do some editing here. Let's change the warp this a little bit so they're a little bit taller. There we go, going right there, and then one that goes in right here. Let's flip this around, see if maybe that will go better there. And then let's make sure this is up a layer above it, so that way, behind, let's see here. I think that looks good there. Let's add in a couple more. Let's flip and rotate this one. And then let's put it behind it. Let's go back one. And we want some in the background. And to show that it's in the background, I'll change the brightness of it so to use contrast. So as I bring the brightness down, you'll notice that that starts to pop out a little bit more. And I'll place another one on the other side like that. And that way we have some darker pools going in. So I think that looks good. I'm just going to keep adding more and more stuff to it. Now, I don't want to add any structures yet because I kind of want to wait for that. So I'm not going to add any structures in. I like to wait to add my structures, have all my landscape first. I think that makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to try to maybe pick something on top of the tree. What might look cool is like maybe some crystals or something kind of coming out of it. That could be more interesting. And I can go with that same color scheme. Let's put some in the back behind it like this. And then I'll bring the brightness down on those ones. A little bit darker. And then we'll take the lighter crystals and then put those in the front. Sticking out like this. There we go. Okay, and so now we have some nice crystals sticking out there. Now I can grab that whole thing, create group, and we're going to call it world tree. And this is going to be my centerpiece. And if I scale it down, then I have my nice world tree. And I want to make it fairly big. I really want to show the importance of scale here, how big this world tree is. So I'm going to scale it up, and I'm going to put it next to a mountain. And you can really get a feel for the grandeur and the size for this tree. It's quite big. So now that we have that there, that looks good. And then we can now kind of create the other parts of it, which I'm kind of thinking might look nice is maybe having some green rivers made of that same material coming out of like caves that are around the crater. So what we can do is we can go in, type cave, and these caves right here will work great. And what I did before is, this time I think I will use, well, let's try hue and see if the purple will work here. No, that isn't going to work. Let's use the luminosity blend mode. I think that looks okay. You know what? Actually, I don't like the luminosity blend mode. Let's bump the saturation up and see if I can find that happy purple spot. There we go. Let's bring the contrast down a little bit, and I think that should work. So I'll copy and paste. Let's flip this one, and then maybe we can kind of scale this one down a little bit and face it like this one here. Let's actually flip it around this way. There we go. And then we'll copy and paste another one over here. Okay, so now we have these kind of tunnels right here with the pools, and then we'll also be able to create some root stuff as well. Let's go over to the line tool. If you go into Fantasy World and you click into the stamp, there should be a river. It's just river. And I'm not going to worry about coloring it or changing anything yet. Instead, I'll just create rivers that go over to here. Now you'll kind of notice that they're really big. That's okay. We're going to scale them down. I'm going to bring the opacity up. I'm going to bring it up a layer. That way it kind of shows it's going from the tunnel itself. And then I'm going to change the hue, of course, to match that more hue, greenish color. There we go. And then we'll make a couple of them. So I'll have another one going this way and then kind of branching out like that. There we go. And then another one that kind of goes, let's see how I want. Oh, let's have this one go into a pool of some kind. In fact, I'll actually put the crater down first. Let's open up this whole thing. Let's select the pool and the shape. We're going to go ahead and create group, create, and I'm going to flip this facing the other way so it doesn't look exactly the same. And I can maybe place a couple of these around here. Copy, paste, flip, scale it down, put it maybe, let's put it over there. Copy, paste. Let's put one behind to add that sense of depth. There we go. So you have that primordial pool there. And I think I'll get rid of this one. We'll just put those two there. Actually, I kind of like that there. We will keep that. Let's maybe have these rivers connect to each other. Like this. There we go. Okay, so those will connect. There we go. We're at 92 changes. Let's go ahead and save it. I love to see the chat so active. That's awesome. And yes, I definitely concur. Go check out Ink and Drink on our Discord server. Incredibly helpful community if you haven't joined already. So great place to start especially if you're kind of new to the tool and don't really know where to start. So definitely join our community. We have a lot of great people there. Okay, so far we've done quite a bit. I'm going to zoom out so you can kind of take a look at it. So there's quite a bit. This Fae is quite large, and it's somewhat central to the map, which is what I wanted it to be, because most of the land is going to be kind of growing out life from it. So I think that's just a good start there. So let's kind of zoom back in here. And what I'll end up doing here is I'm going to kind of repaint over it real quick. Because what I want to do is I didn't use the same method I've been doing to paint everything else, which is using the edgy brush. And the edgy brush is really, really cool. So with the edgy brush, I'm going to turn smooth off, turn it to 3 on its edginess. And whenever you're using the edgy brush, you always have to bring the opacity down, because these don't have a softened edge like the circle brush has. So when you place it down, you're going to notice that it kind of gives a lot. So you'll have to bring the opacity down quite a bit. And what's really cool is you can go in and just kind of start in the center part. We talked about this in the last episode, but start in the center with your first coat of texturing or paint, and then go in and apply your second coat, and then single click. Start to single click like this, and then bring in the size way down, and then you can start single clicking these little dots. And what's really cool is the edgy brush starts to kind of create these nice artifacts, these kind of cells, and I think those cells kind of make the texturing look more interesting. So just remember the trick. You always have to start with a smaller size, and you have to bring the opacity down. Okay, so kind of helpful stuff. I did a lot of changes there. Texturing is something that there's going to be a lot of clicking and adding a lot of layers. And so when that happens, you just have to end up saving. I try to stick around 100 or so. If you're doing a lot of texturing, then it's okay to go above that. But just to be safe, we are an online tool. And as you know, Google sometimes, the browser sometimes has these caps on the kind of megabytes that you can have. And so to kind of prevent an internet timeout, just save your work often enough. It's just the hazard that you kind of have to deal with when you're doing online tools. So now that all of that is done, I think the last part that we want to do is probably add in some trees. These are the primordial planes, and that they kind of started out as the primordial planes, but I'm going to put a lot of trees, I think, around it, and we'll kind of choose an interesting tree type. Normally, in the previous episodes, we talked about making forests, and you notice we used the shape tool to kind of make these forests. And I'm not going to do that in this episode. I'm going to stick with individual trees here, just to kind of give it a more diversity. When I think of like the Fae, I think of like a diversity of different colored trees and stuff. I think that would look more interesting. So we'll go type in tree. And you'll notice that there's these purple ones here. You got this more lighter purple. You got this one. I think these 3 trees might do well. So what I'll do is I'll place each one kind of down here, so that way I can kind of select them when I need them. Let's go with this one as well. And when I'm doing my forests, especially my forests that have kind of diversity, I'll start with one type of tree and I'll create clusters of them. So we'll start with this tree here and then make a couple clusters. Do this one here, make a couple clusters. And what I'll do is I'll make a ring of trees that goes around it, because this is the centerpiece, and to frame it, it makes sense to kind of add some stuff that goes around it. So now I'll do some single individual trees, and what's always nice to do is overlap. Have some overlapping the cave, have some overlapping the crater, overlapping the river. Having these trees overlap is super important, because that's going to give it a sense of realism when you have this overlap. So overlapping these, put some here, here, all very helpful to kind of put it together. Okay, so now that we've added in those ones, let's go ahead and add in some other ones. So I'll go in, single click. Just going to single click here and there just to kind of fill in spaces here and there. There we go. So our Fae is kind of coming to life a little bit more. And then we'll do in that last one right here, this lighter purple one. And I'll just kind of place these scattered, kind of just rando, 1 and 2 here and there, like this. Because the closer you get to the tree of life, there's more and more forest. There's more and more life. So to kind of show that, I'll just put single little individual trees the further I get away from the world tree. Okay. Now I can go ahead and delete these. I don't really need these anymore. And so our Fae has kind of come to life. Now there's some other things that I might want to do to give it some nice effects, and that is to add in some shadows, add in some spells, some effects and stuff like that. So what I can do is I can go into, let's see here. Let's go to fantasy, let's go to sci-fi battle maps for a moment. And there should be this nice light stamp. Let me see if I can find it. This one right here. This blue one. I think that's going to work just fine. Let's use that. But let's do some editing. Let's change it to that greenish color. And then let's also change the width. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have light coming out of the river. Beams of light coming out of the river like this. And we'll end up changing the lighting of this a little bit. But first, let's just kind of add them on there. And I'm going to end up adding some light sources too, so that way those rivers really pop out. Because I want the primordial pools to have a magical element to them. It's where life kind of began on my world. The firstborn were the Fae in my lore of this world. And so to kind of show that, I want to make sure that I have some magic going on there. So let's go ahead and select all of them like that. And let's switch to lighten. There we go. That gets it a little bit brighter. Let's change the width a little bit more, and let's change the hue a little bit more. It seems a little off still. I want to make sure I get that right color. Let's go with that. I think that should do good. And then let's add in some light sources. Let's see here. We don't want that. Let's go to fantasy battle maps. Okay, let's use this. When you're doing light sources, I recommend the orange one because it works really well with the hue. And so I can go in and kind of use the hue to get that color that I want. And I'm going to place these, bring the opacity down, and I'm just going to place these pretty much copy and paste these all along the rivers that are here. There we go. Get that popping out. There we go. And then I'm going to take a large one, a large green one. And a cool little trick that you can do here is you can kind of place a large light source on top of something, and then you can play with the blend modes to get some really interesting effects. So you can kind of get some interesting effects by doing this. You can go with overlay, hard light. You can go with difference. See if that one's kind of interesting, the way that difference kind of gives it that interesting look. Oh, I like that. That's kind of cool. Let's go with that. That's cool. Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. Let's change the blend mode again, so that way we can kind of get some different stuff here. Let's go with lighten. Should be a good one. Let's go with that. I'm just going to put that right on top. And let's change the hue to get that more purplish color. There we go. Copy, paste. There we go. And so now we kind of have this interesting Fae-like world going on. It's unique. It's interesting. The last thing that I might want to do is that I do want this world, I do want this primordial area to be kind of closed off from the rest of the world. So creating a fog wall, a wall of fog or mist, where monsters live inside of that mist and protect the primordial pools from invaders or people trying to take the water, because there's some kind of myths and legends about what can happen when you drink the water from the primordial pools. And so it needs to be protected. So we'll let this save, and then we're going to create that fog wall or mist that's going to go around that. So what I'll end up doing is, let's go into the catalog and we can type in cloud. And let's go to Fantasy World, because I think those have some clouds there. Let's go with smoke instead, because I don't think that's going to work. Let's go with this one right here. Maybe. No, we'll save that for a different style. Let's go with this one. I think this should work good. And what I'll do is I'm just going to place these clouds around the edge, but I'm going to change the color of them by bumping up the saturation, and then we can kind of change the hue to whatever color we want. And then I'm going to go ahead and just create this foggy presence that kind of goes around. Let's go all the way up a layer. There we go. Oopsie, let's go down one. Let me check. Yeah, that looks good. Let's place another one. Ooh, let's make sure that I get them all the way around here. Oh, there we go. That looks good. And then one more right there. Yes. Okay, there we go. So now you have like this kind of cloud wall that kind of goes around, that kind of keeps everything kind of protected, and there's going to be monsters in there. So I think the last thing that I'll add is maybe some sparks or some snow from Fantasy Battle Maps. And I'll just put them right on top like this. And this can kind of represent, like, I'm not sure how to describe it, but maybe like fairies or little creatures that are flying around the tree, buzzing around the tree and kind of protect it. So now I'll just go ahead and select all, create group, and we're going to call this Fae. Create, there we go. And now I have this Fae structure right here, which I can kind of move anywhere I want now. Just have to retexture it, but place it right here. And so we have our lore for this put together. We have our trees put together. I think the one thing we have that's a problem is pushing this up a layer. There we go. Because these trees are above it, and I want them to be below it. There we go. That looks better. Oh, same thing right here. Let's go ahead and put these trees right here behind. That looks a little weird, doesn't it? Okay, push this down a layer. And we can just delete them, actually. There we go. Okay. So I think all of the Fae stuff is there. Everything looks good. This is that primordial land. Let's go ahead and quickly save it, and then we'll move on to Volcanic. Okay. Yes. Oh, look at all this. Oh, I'm learning some new lore here in the chat. Yeah, I like that. Cool. I love history. I love mythology. All that stuff is really interesting. And, you know, it's good to have an interest in myth and lore history, because it kind of helps you a little bit with kind of being more creative. Doesn't mean that you have to, but watching a history documentary or a geography documentary once in a while can kind of help you with your world building. It kind of gives you an idea of kind of scenarios that you can create, your creation story, whatever it might be. It's always nice to kind of learn a little bit more to kind of help push you. to become a little bit better at what you do. So always very helpful, right? So let's go with Volcanic. I'm going to lock this. I think this Fey turned out really good. I'm going to take a step back and just see how it looks. It really, really stands out in comparison to everything else, doesn't it? We might end up changing it later, but for now, I think it's got the general idea of it. It's got this eerie kind of feel to it, which is what I was kind of going for. So let's go ahead and work on Volcanic. Now, when I'm doing my volcanic stuff, what I end up doing is I like to have the volcanoes near a mountain range so that way it kind of is justified why that volcano is there. And so what I'll end up doing is I'll probably take a volcano as the centerpiece. I'll start there, and then I'll put some mountains around it or create some kind of mountain range with it. First, I'll kind of pick a texture that I want to work just to kind of give me an idea of where it is. So I'll go with Fantasy Regional, open that up. We'll pick some kind of red texture of some kind. It doesn't really matter. Let's go with Fantasy World Red. Again, this is not the final texture that we'll end up using. It's just the one that you kind of use. Let's make sure our opacity is down and then just kind of fill in the red right here like this. This is kind of where it's going to be. There we go. I like that. Okay, so we got that red there. Let's go ahead and add in the first thing, and any place is adding in the centerpiece. So we'll add in a volcano. And you see there's a bunch that you can kind of choose from here. It's up to you which one you really want to use. There's a darker and a lighter one, and the way that I kind of decide whether to use a darker one or a lighter one is really determined on the texture that's beneath it. So if you feel that a darker one doesn't pop out as much or pops out too much, then you can kind of switch between the two. I kind of like the lighter one. It seems to be lighter than the texture beneath it, and so it really pops out. And then I can kind of add in some texturing to blend it in. So I'll start with this volcano first, and to give it a sense of more grandness, I'll kind of skew it a little bit, just like that. And then I can go in now and add in the non-volcanic one, the ones that don't have the lava in it. And so adding these in will look kind of nice. See, I'm going to make sure I'm on the right layer too. Just make sure I'm starting out the right layer. Notice that I keep starting on layer 4, and I don't want to do that. So let's also scale them down. I want the volcano to be the bigger of the ranges that are in there. And then I could also go in and go to my other mountains, and I can just edit this a little bit to kind of match in the other ones there. So I can go to hue, go to saturation, and then I can kind of use these to kind of fill in the rest. And what I want to do here is I'm going to create kind of these tendrils of mountains that are kind of creating like these, I don't know, tendrils or something or other. So I'll kind of create these things that kind of emanate from it like this. And let's put one here on this edge because I want to isolate this region a little bit from the other regions. And what I want to do is I want to create these little negative spaces in which there's going to be things that are going to be happening. So I'll create this negative space here. Let's put some over here, some over here, and let's have one that kind of snakes along this cliffside like that, and then a couple more over here. There we go. Okay, let's move this one over here. Okay, so now that we've kind of put that together, we can kind of start blending those things together. So I'll just choose a gray texture, and then I'm going to do the edgy brush. I'm going to go with the smallest size, all the way to 1. And then right underneath, just kind of single click right underneath. And then what you can do is you'll start seeing these little cells that kind of start to blend in the mountains with that red texture, because without that texture underneath to blend it in, it looks a little odd. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can blend it in as well. You could just use a object shadow. I could select it all and just go to object shadow like this, and that's going to make it pop out more, and that's kind of cool. Or I can just use a gray texture of my choice and then just bring the offset down and then bring the verticality. And so you already kind of see this gray that kind of grows underneath it. So there's that method too. There's a lot of different ways you can go about doing it. And you could also show, obviously, the shadow of the mountains by using the shadows. You could go to Object, Custom Object Shadow, and you see how it's black. I can move it to the side if I want to have them this way or this way. So kind of helpful when you want to create these kind of mountain ranges that seem like they pop out. I'm not going to do that for right now because all my other mountains don't do that. And I will say that the more object shadows that you do, the more it kind of lags your machine a little bit. So we will probably add object shadows to all of our mountains at the end so that that way it doesn't kind of lag or slow down our process when putting this together. Okay, so what I'm going to do here now is I want to have these lava that's coming away from that volcano right there and then going to the ocean. And then as the lava connects into the ocean, this steam is going to be rising up. So you'll see all this wall of kind of steam over here. And I think that will look kind of interesting. So cool thing that you can do is you can use the river tool or the river shape to create lava. The way that I would go about doing it is I would bump the saturation all the way up, and then you can kind of change the hue to kind of get that color that you're kind of looking for. And if you can't get the color of the lava that you're looking for, then you can just paint it in, or you can use the line tool with a clipping mask. I'm sorry, not a clipping mask, but a, let's see here. You could use a line with a clipping mask, and then you can paint it on, or you could use a color. What I think I might do is paint it on because it'll look more interesting. So I'll go into Inkarnate tab, and this way it'll show all the textures. And we'll let that load, and I'm going to type in lava. And then I can kind of choose one of these lavas that I think might work best to work with this. And what I'm kind of noticing about this is there's both a yellow and orange and a little bit of red. And the texture that I'm using has a little bit of that. See how it has that red, has a little bit of red, a little bit of orange, a little bit of the yellow, and that way it won't deviate too much. I'm not going to use the edgy brush for this. I'm going to use the circle brush. I'm going to bring the opacity up. I might bring it down a little bit, maybe to like 77, bring up the size a little bit, maybe 2. And I just want to see what it looks like when I add it on. Let's bring it down to 1 instead. There we go. And I'm going to have it go right to the ocean. We'll have these kind of connect. Have this one kind of go off. This one kind of goes this way. Okay, and I want these to kind of connect right to where the ocean is. There we go. And let's put another one that kind of goes over like this. There we go. Okay, so now we have some lava. Let's take a step back and just see what it looks like. Yeah, I like the way that that lava kind of goes towards there. That looks good. The color looks good. And if you want, you can create your own lava just by simply using the top layer, or you can use a clipping mask. So I could take a clipping mask and just make sure that I have the layer up above the volcano. And so I can go down like this and then right there. And then I can take that same texture and then I can just paint it in just like that. There you go. So we'll do that same thing. Let's just do that with multiple. Let's add in another stream here. Let's add another stream that goes in down here. Let's have one that kind of goes down here into here like this. And then I'll go ahead and paint them. There we go. So now I have multiple streams of lava kind of coming off of it. Another good thing that you can do is add in a light source. It's lava, so there's going to be a lot of light. So I'll go ahead and take a light source, orange one, put it right on top, just like that. And I'll put another one right here where these lava is, but I'll bring the opacity down because it's not the volcano itself. So I'll bring the opacity down a little bit and then just put that right on top. And then there's that glow that you're looking for. And then let's add some smoke. And there's a really nice smoke that you can use in Fantasy World where it has the light already built into it. And I think that would work great for this volcano. So I can just kind of place it right on top like this. And I might have it face the other way, this way. I think that would look more interesting. So that way it doesn't kind of cover too much of the land there. There we go. Where are we at for time? 3:40, tons of time. Let's go ahead and add in some more details. I think what would be nice is to have in some jagged landscape to make it more interesting. And so if you kind of go into the fantasy world here, there should be these kind of, oh, you know, we could use these crystals right here. These could work just fine to kind of represent this jagged landscape that I could put at the base of the mountains. All I'll do is just desaturate them. And let's bring the brightness up on them a little bit. And let me place them to make sure that I can see them. Let's bring the brightness up a little bit more. I want to make sure that I can see them. Let's see here. Let's go up a layer. There we go. And I'll just go ahead and place these kind of spikes all along the mountain ranges here to kind of give it a little bit more of a more spiky feel to it. Oopsie, that one didn't really connect. Make sure that they connect when you add them on there. Let's put one there. Kind of be a little strategic about it. I think some on the top should look interesting. This gives it a more jagged kind of feel to it, which is what I kind of want. There we go. That looks good. Let's put another one right here. And then let's put some smaller ones on the ground. So make them nice and small. And I'll put them next to where the big ones are at. There we go. So I have this like jagged landscape. Now you're kind of noticing that it's blurry. Don't worry about that. When it comes to editing, that's just the way it is when you're working with the scale. But when you go to export, you'll be able to export up to like 16K. So it may be blurry now when you're doing the editing, but it won't be later. So just kind of remember that. Don't get discouraged if you're like, well, this is super blurry, I can't see. Don't worry. That is okay. Okay, I kind of like those there. Let's add a couple more at the base of these mountains. That looks good. Okay, and then what could be cool is to throw down some interesting different colors. Like we could put in some craters in these negative space. And if you're not sure what I mean by negative space, I mean these spaces right here where there's nothing going on. Right here, this is all negative space. This is negative space. This in here is negative space. And negative space is not always a bad thing. Know that some negative space is good. In art theory, negative space is a reprieve from a very busy positive space where there's a lot of stamps. So when you take a look at this map here, you'll notice that it's very busy in this section with all this gray. And then the eye rests in the negative space. So if I am going to put something in that negative space, I don't want it to be as bright and overpowering as the mountains. So if I put some craters down there or some cracks or crevices, I'm going to make sure that it blends in and it's kind of opaque enough to where it's not going to draw attention away from my mountains and all of that stuff. So it's kind of important to remember that. So you can type in chasm, or I think maybe they have craters, terrain, there we go. And then you'll notice that it's brown and it doesn't really match. That's okay. Remember in the blend mode trick, luminosity. And then I think I'll bring the brightness down a little bit. And then I can also bring the contrast down just to kind of make it not pop out so as much. Let's bring it down a layer. And then I'll place a couple of these. Let's go back to blend mode luminosity. And I'll place a couple of these in the cracked area. This will kind of represent kind of a barren space with some cracks. Let's put one there. Let's put some over here as well. And then let's put one, I think that should be good for now. Now, if you don't like those chasms, know that you can also use a texture to create the same effect. There's a cool texture in fantasy battle maps. Let me see if I can find it here. Fantasy battle maps. Now, fantasy battle map textures might not work with fantasy world, but you can make it work out a little bit. I think it's in Orc. This right here, there's this cracked ground right here. This might work fairly well. Let's maybe apply some of it real quick on the ground just to see what it looks like. See the scaling issue? Remember we mentioned that earlier? There we go. Bring the scale way down. And I'm just gonna very lightly single click this, and this will create that nice cracked ground, and it also kind of gives it a little bit of extra oomph to it, which I kind of like. So I'll kind of place some cracked ground there, here. There we go. And then maybe a little bit over here as well. There we go. So you got some nice cracked ground. We're at 457 changes, 400 something changes. We should probably save it. After we save, we'll go ahead and add in the last bit of details for this. So far, I like the way that it looks, but there's probably some other things that I might want to add in, like I think what might be nice is like a dead forest, or maybe like a petrified forest where everything has been petrified. That could be kind of interesting. But first, we'll focus on the smoke that's, or the mist, the steam that's going to be coming when these things right here hit the river. So let's go ahead and hit in smoke. Let's see here. Fantasy world, I think. We can use these. These will be fine. And let's look at the direction in which this smoke is going, so that way I'm staying true to the wind direction. So if I have like one piece of smoke going the other direction and one going the other direction, that might look weird. So just for continuity's sake, I'll flip it and make sure it's facing the right way. And then I'll take this one, I'm going to push it up a layer, and I'm going to, wherever it's touching, I'm going to place it there, and I'll bring the opacity down so that way it's not overpowering. And then just going to place one of these little smokes, these things just right over there. And so now you have this kind of little smoke wall right here that gets right there. And then the other thing is I want to add in a couple things here. There's still plenty of negative space, and so we can use that negative space to make some interesting things. One thing we could do is I want to create maybe like these standing stones or petrified stones. And so these right here might work well, and they kind of fit well with the color as well. Oopsie, they're at the wrong opacity. Let me place it down. There we go. They're a little too bright, so I could probably bring the brightness down a little bit and maybe change the hue. I just want them to kind of match. Bring the saturation down. I think that should do it. So let's just place a couple of these here and there. There we go. I think that looks good. Place them over here. And so I have this nice like section of this volcanic area where they have these like the volcanic or petrified like rock statues or whatever they might be in that area. And so that's kind of a nice little area that you can explore. And then I'm also going to add in some kind of like dead forest. It could be petrified. It could be whatever. It could be just be dead trees. Let's use these right here. Bring the scale down. And what I think I'll do is I'll bring the brightness down to have them be very dark so that they kind of pop out. And then I'll create a little forest right in here. Oopsie, I think I have single click. So let's go to placement, turn off auto select, and then select multiple. And now I'll be able to select multiple. Let's even bring the scale down a little bit. And I'm just going to create this forest of trees in here. And I think that will add another bit of depth because these are dark against the light color. And so this will really, really pop out. There we go. We have some nice trees in here. So now we have like a dead forest there. There we go. And then the last part is maybe adding in like some sulfur flats. And I think where this is right here is a good place to kind of add in some kind of flat. There should be a grass texture. Actually, I wonder if there's a cracked texture that I could use in fantasy. Let's go with parchment. There's this cracked ground right here. Let me see what this looks like when I apply it, just to kind of see what it looks like. Yeah, that's got some nice cracks to it. I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and apply those cracks to this area right here. Get some nice cracks. There we go. Get some nice cracks in there. I think that looks good. Add a couple more right here. There we go. I'm just going to keep adding more and more cracks all along here. There we go. Okay, I think that looks good. We're going to go ahead and save it with so many changes. All right. Now, I'm not 100% satisfied with how the Fae kind of turned out. I think I might have overdid it with that light source on top of it. So I might do some changes off screen, but I think you guys get the general idea on kind of how to put it together. But I think overall this looks good. I was able to even fit in multiple kind of sections within the volcanic region, which I think was super important because a biome can have many, many different things within it. It might not just be all one biome, like just a forest. This volcanic space has a lot going on. There's those sulfur flats. We've also got the standing stones up here at the top, and then a forest here. So that really gives the diversity of this biome. It's not just lava and heat and all that stuff. It's a mix of multiple things here. So I think that's going to be it for the end of the stream. I think it turned out pretty good. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you enjoyed the Fae. I was a little nervous that it didn't look good, but I think you get the general idea. It definitely has a magical feel to it because it really pops out compared to the other biomes quite a bit. But we'll be adding more biomes as we go. As you've noticed, we've been doing a lot of the Friday streams this month are going to be focused on this series because some people were getting a little worried, like, well, wait a minute, so we're only watching one episode a month? I totally understand. That's a long time to wait, and not everyone has the time to wait. So we'll be sure to try to finish up this stream series by the end of this month. We should probably have it be done, and we'll work on a new project. And if you all have questions or ideas about that, you'll let me know. The last thing that I'll mention, because I didn't really touch a lot base into lore, because we just go into a lot of the functionality of the tool. But one thing I want to say about lore is the way that you get lore, the way that you can kind of go about getting lore is starting by making the land first. It's really hard when you have a blank canvas and there's nothing to work with for you to come up with a lore for a region. That's why when I work on my map, I make all the terrain first, or at least the majority of the terrain. And then once the terrain is made, then I can draw inspiration from the land to create the lore of the world that I'm creating. It's just much harder when you're starting from a blank canvas and then trying to add the lore and then add the land from the lore. Now, that's just my method. There's a lot of different ways. Some people are very good writers. They're good at coming up with lore. Maybe they use ChatGPT or whatever it is they use to come up with that lore. Maybe that's easy for you. But for me, always, I make the land first, and then I can kind of draw inspiration from that land and then kind of create the lore. So when we finish most of the land on this map, we'll really start diving more and more into lore. All right, well, thanks everyone. That concludes the stream. Please stay safe and healthy, and merry map making. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'll see you all next week. Take it easy, okay? Bye.